Lena hadn't planned to adopt a dog that day. It was supposed to be just a quick visit to the local animal shelter, a little Saturday distraction from the weight of her third trimester. She and her husband, Omar, had been talking about getting a dog someday, maybe after the baby came. But then they saw him. He didn't bark like the others. He didn't even come to the front of his kennel. Instead, the huge Great Dane lay stretched out along the concrete floor, facing the wall, completely still. His fur was charcoal grey with patches of white along his paws, and he looked more like a statue than a living thing. When Lena crouched near the bars and softly called, "Hey, buddy," the dog didn't even twitch. A shelter worker noticed her watching. "That's Atlas," she said. "He came in 2 weeks ago. Owner surrender. He's different." "Different how?" Omar asked. The worker hesitated. "He doesn't bark, doesn't play, barely eats. He's not aggressive, just sad." Something about that word sad got to Lena. She couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the pregnancy hormones. Maybe it was the way Atlas looked like he'd already given up on the world. Or maybe it was just that quiet, invisible pain she recognized all too well. Pain that didn't scream or cry. Pain that just sat silently in a corner and waited to be forgotten. "Can I meet him?" she asked. They opened the kennel door slowly. Atlas didn't move until Lena entered. He turned his head, eyes dull and slow. Then, in a movement so unexpected it nearly made her gasp, he slowly got up, walked over, and pressed the side of his giant head gently into her belly. Lena froze. Omar's voice broke the silence. "He's hugging you." But Lena couldn't speak. Her hand moved to the back of Atlas's neck, fingers brushing the short, wiry fur. The dog made a soft, low sigh, like he had been holding his breath for years and had finally let it out. That's when she knew. There would be no coming back later, no thinking about it. Atlas wasn't just any dog, he was theirs now. The car ride home was quiet. Atlas sat in the back seat, head low, staring out the window with eyes that had clearly seen too much. He didn't pant, didn't whine. Not once. Just watched the world pass by as if it no longer belonged to him. At home, he moved like a shadow. Despite his massive frame, he padded around carefully, avoiding furniture and corners like someone who'd been yelled at too many times for existing. He didn't sniff or explore. He found a quiet spot by the front door, lay down and stayed there, not guarding, waiting. Lena brought him a bowl of water. He drank only when she walked away. They tried food. He didn't touch it. Later that night, Lena sat cross-legged on the living room floor watching him. "He's not just scared," she said softly to Omar. "He's heartbroken." Omar rubbed his neck. "Poor guy. We don't know what happened to him before, but he'll be safe here. We'll show him." As if hearing the promise, Atlas slowly lifted his head and looked at them for the first time. And for just a second, something flickered in his eyes. Not joy, not trust, but something like hope. That night, while Lena and Omar settled into bed, Atlas made his way upstairs and lay just outside their bedroom door. He didn't make a sound. But when Lena shifted in her sleep, the dog stirred, ears twitching, already on alert. The gentle giant had found a new home, and unknown to them all, something had already begun to bloom inside him. A fierce, silent vow to protect what had been, placed in his care, even if it broke him. Atlas never barked, not at the doorbell, not at cars, not even at the neighbor's beagle who screamed through the fence every morning like a siren. He'd lift his head at sudden noises, ears perked, but never made a sound, just watched, always watching. Lena noticed it first, how he avoided the hallway closet, flinched at the sound of plastic bags rustling, and refused to enter the laundry room. Omar thought it was just quirks, but Lena had lived with silence before, the kind that comes not from peace but from fear. She saw it in the way Atlas moved, not cautiously but apologetically, like he believed every step was a mistake. They tried everything to make him comfortable. Treats, toys, open arms. Some days he let them scratch behind his ears. Other days even their softest voice made him back into a corner. And always he kept one eye on Lena's stomach. By now, the baby bump was undeniable. At 7 months, Lena moved slower, waddled a bit, and carried a gentle tiredness around her like a second skin. Atlas never left her side. When she sat on the couch, he lay beside her, chin resting gently against her belly. When she went to the bathroom, he lay outside the door until she returned. It was sweet but also intense, almost obsessive. Omar chuckled the first time he caught Atlas standing beside Lena while she napped like a stone sentinel. "We've got ourselves a full-time bodyguard." Lena didn't laugh. "I think he's more than that," she said softly. "It's like he knows there's someone in there." It became a nightly ritual. As Lena lowered herself into bed with a groan, Atlas would pad over, press his face gently to her belly, and stay there, still as a statue, until she fell asleep. Sometimes, when the baby kicked, Atlas's ears twitched. Once, he whined so softly it sounded like a broken violin string. Lena placed a hand on his head. "You feel him too, don't you?" Atlas blinked slowly. His eyes, always so quiet, were flooded with something Lena didn't expect: sorrow. One morning, Lena woke to find Atlas not outside their bedroom, but curled at the foot of the crib in the nursery, the empty crib still untouched, still too early. The room wasn't ready yet. No sheets, no toys, just soft paint on the walls and a mobile that didn't spin, and yet, there he was, like he was already standing guard. When she told Omar, he looked puzzled. "Why would he go in there?" Lena hesitated. I think he's waiting." "For the baby?" She nodded. Omar smiled and kissed her cheek. "He's going to be Ayan's best friend." Lena looked back at the nursery, her heart tightening. Or maybe his protector. That evening, Lena sat on the couch, cradling a mug of lukewarm tea. Atlas lay beside her, head on her knee. She absent-mindedly scratched behind his ears. "You've seen something, haven't you?" she whispered. "Something awful." Atlas didn't move, but his breathing changed, slower, deeper, like her. Voice reached some locked door inside him. "You don't have to carry it anymore," she said, eyes filling. Whatever it was. The dog pressed his forehead into her knee. Later, as the sky faded into indigo and the stars began to appear, Lena stood by the nursery door, watching Atlas once again curled beneath the crib. His large body wrapped gently around the legs of the frame, nose tucked near the center, like he was already wrapping himself around the baby who hadn't even arrived yet. It wasn't just loyalty. It was grief, and love, and something else. A promise. One Lena didn't yet understand, but would soon. The day baby Ayan was born, the sky was pale with winter light, soft flakes of snow drifting across the hospital parking lot like feathers. After 37 long, exhausting hours of labor, Lena held her son to her chest and wept quietly. Part from joy, part from sheer disbelief that he was finally here, Omar couldn't stop staring. "He's got your eyes," he whispered, brushing a finger down the baby's cheek. "And my stubborn chin." They stayed at the hospital for 2 days. During that time, Atlas refused to eat. Back home, he paced by the front door, circling it, every few hours. He sniffed Lena's empty slippers, lay by the nursery crib, and occasionally wandered into their bedroom, confused, ears twitching. His routine had cracked open, and though no one else could hear it, something inside Atlas had begun to panic. Then the front door opened. Lena stepped inside slowly, bundled in winter layers, baby Ayan wrapped tight against her chest. Atlas didn't run. He didn't bark. He froze, his massive head tilted, eyes locked on the tiny bundle of cloth in Lena's arms. His legs trembled. He took one uncertain step forward, then another. Omar placed a gentle hand on his collar. "Easy, big guy." Lena knelt on the rug and carefully lowered herself until she was sitting, Ayan still swaddled. Atlas crept closer. Every inch of his body was tense, vibrating with something ancient. Fear, maybe. Or hope. He leaned his nose forward and inhaled, deeply. Then he exhaled with a low, shaky sound that wasn't quite a whine, and then, with the delicacy of a giant holding a hummingbird, Atlas laid his head across Lena's lap, just inches from the baby's feet. From that moment on, he never left Ayan's side. When the baby cried, Atlas was there first, often faster than Lena. He'd nudge the crib with his snout, whimpering softly until the baby was soothed. At night he slept not beside the crib, but around it, like his body had been designed for this very purpose. His long legs curled inward, tail tucked close, massive chest rising and falling against the crib's wooden frame. From above, it looked like a living wreath of fur wrapped around the sleeping baby. Lena and Omar watched it all in silence. "Don't think he sleeps deeply anymore," Lena said one night. "I don't think he's supposed to," Omar replied, running a hand through Atlas's fur. "He's guarding him." At first they thought it was sweet, a loyal protector, a gentle giant with a big heart. But soon they began to notice other things. If they moved Ayan to the play mat on the floor, Atlas would follow and lie in a circle around him, back legs tucked under, head resting near the baby's toes. If guests came over, Atlas would place himself between them and the child, unmoving, tail still, eyes narrowed, not aggressive, but unmistakably watchful. When Lena's mother tried to lift Ayan from the crib, Atlas stood up instantly. No bark, no growl. Just a towering wall of muscle and sadness, silently asking, "Who are you taking him from?" And then came the strangest thing of all. Atlas stopped eating unless the baby was awake. They tried everything. Special food, hand feeding, even sitting with him. But until Ayan stirred, cried, or babbled, Atlas wouldn't touch a bite. Something inside him had shifted. No longer just a companion, Atlas had become a sentry, ruled not by instinct, but by a haunting obligation, as if the baby's safety was his second chance at something he'd once failed. Omar, watching from the hallway one night, whispered, "He's not just protecting Ayan, he's trying to save someone else." Lena nodded, a chill creeping down her spine. Someone he couldn't save the first time. The love was powerful, but underneath it, something darker stirred, a guilt that hadn't yet revealed its source, and Atlas was just getting started. It happened on a Thursday night, cold, still, and silent. Lena had finally managed to sleep after nursing Ayan through a fussy evening. The baby, now 2 months old, had been unusually restless all day. Omar dimmed the hallway light, cracked the nursery door, and peeked inside. Atlas was already in position, curled tightly around the crib like a great grey blanket with ears. "I don't know how he fits," Omar whispered with a tired smile. "He won't let himself rest unless he's touching the crib," Lena said, pulling the blanket up to her chin. "It's like he thinks the world will fall apart if he doesn't." They were both asleep within minutes. Down the hall, the nursery glowed faintly with the soft blue of a nightlight. The crib was quiet. Taisan, swaddled in a pale yellow blanket, slept on his back, his tiny chest rising and falling in slow, rhythmic breaths. Atlas watched for a while, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed. Then something changed. It was subtle. A twitch. A small, almost imperceptible shift in the baby's breathing. Atlas's ears shot up. He stood suddenly, so fast and so sharply that his nails scratched against the hardwood floor. He peered into the crib, sniffing, sensing. Then came the sound, a faint, irregular hiccup of breath. The dog let out a low whimper, then a growl, not of aggression, but of fear. And then, for the first time in his new home, Atlas barked, a deep, desperate, earth-shaking sound that ripped through the night like an alarm. Lena sat bolt upright. "Ayan!" Omar was already out of bed, running. They reached the nursery together, hearts pounding, breath catching, and saw Atlas reared up, paws against the crib, barking again, frantic. Omar pushed him gently aside, reached into the crib, and froze. Ayan wasn't breathing. The blanket had somehow slipped during the night and bunched near his nose and mouth. He was pale, too pale. Lena didn't scream. She didn't have time. Her hands moved fast, unwrapping the cloth, freeing his face. She gently tilted his head, rubbed his back, murmuring his name like a prayer. Then a gasp, followed by a weak cry, followed by Atlas collapsing onto the floor in sheer relief. The room was chaos for a few moments. Lena cradled Ayan, rocking him. Gently, her own tears running down her cheeks as Omar called the pediatrician, stammering through the words. And through it all, Atlas lay still, his eyes wide open, breathing shallow. He watched Lena with the baby in her arms, watched Ayan's tiny fingers grip his mother's sweater, and only then did he close his eyes, not to sleep, but to hold back something else, a memory. Later that night, after the pediatrician had assured them Ayan was okay, after they had triple-checked the crib and changed the swaddle and sat holding him for hours, Lena knelt beside Atlas and buried her hands into his fur. "You saved him," she whispered, voice trembling. "You saved my baby." Atlas didn't lift his head. He didn't wag his tail, he just stayed there, still as ever. Shoulders hunched, eyes glazed, as though he'd only barely escaped something horrible, something that had already happened once before. That night changed everything. From that moment on, Atlas refused to sleep unless his entire body was wrapped around Ayan's crib. Even after they bought a breathing monitor and a new sleep sack. Even when the doctor told them it was a rare but fixable scare. For Atlas, it wasn't just a scare. It was a reminder. And though he couldn't speak, though he couldn't share what haunted him, he made one thing crystal clear. He had failed to save a child once. He would never let it happen again. Not this time. Not ever. Atlas became more than a dog after that night. He became a guardian bound by something deeper than instinct. He never left Ayan's side, even as the baby began to grow and change. When Ayan kicked during diaper changes, Atlas was there. When he giggled at the dancing shadows on the wall, Atlas was curled beside him, tail thumping gently. When he cried in the middle of the night, Atlas arrived before either parent, always alert, always watching. Lena tried not to worry. "He's just protective," she told Omar. "Loyal." But she couldn't shake the feeling that Atlas wasn't just watching the baby. He was waiting for something, or someone. One quiet morning, while Ayan napped and Omar ran errands, Lena decided to finally sort through Atlas's old shelter file. It had come home with them in a manila envelope, mostly ignored, tucked into the kitchen drawer next to unpaid bills and spare charger cables. She sat at the table, sipping cold coffee, and opened it. What she found chilled her. Atlas wasn't surrendered by a family with no time, as the shelter worker had vaguely said. He had come from a home where a tragedy had taken place. A child, barely a year old, who had died under what the file called unclear circumstances. Atlas had been found curled around the crib, unmoving, silent. The parents, both under investigation, at the time, claimed the dog had acted strange in the days leading up to the death, that he was too obsessed with the baby. They'd accused him of being unpredictable, possibly dangerous, but the file included a note from the shelter. Vet, no signs of aggression, behavior more consistent with grief response. Animal appears to be mourning. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She read the last line twice. Owner refused to take the dog back. Dog was sedated to remove from the home. She sat frozen, hands shaking, staring at the page as if it might rewrite itself. Atlas hadn't failed. A child. He had loved one, and lost him, and been blamed for it. And now, he had been given another. That night, Lena didn't say anything to Omar. She just watched Atlas sleeping, curled again around the crib, his nose tucked near Ayan's tiny feet. The dog twitched in his sleep, whined softly, dreamed. But it wasn't the restless dream of a happy dog. It was the sound of someone reliving something they couldn't forget. 2 days later, Lena received a letter from the shelter, one she hadn't expected. Inside was a small photo sent by accident, the note said. It was a standard intake image from the shelter's files, Atlas sitting beside a woman holding a baby. The woman's face was blurred for privacy, but the child, just under a year old, was not. Lena's stomach flipped. The baby had the same wide, curious eyes as Ayan, the same soft curl in the hair. Even the shape of the jaw looked familiar. She set the photo down slowly. Atlas looked up from his spot by the crib, sensing her emotion. He stood and walked over, nose gently nudging her knee. Lena reached for him with both hands and pulled his massive head into her lap. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Ah, you were never the monster. You were the one who tried." Atlas closed his eyes, and for the first time in weeks his whole body relaxed, not into sleep, but into something more fragile. Trust. The bond between dog and child grew stronger. But Lena now understood. This wasn't just devotion, it was redemption. And deep inside Atlas's heart, the ghost of another child still lingered, watching, waiting, needing closure. Something unfinished had followed him into this new life, and it would not rest until it was made right. It began with the dreams, not Ayan's. He still slept soundly, swaddled in peace and warmth. No, the dreams belonged to Lena, and in each one she heard the same thing, a child crying, not Ayan's wail, not the sharp scream of hunger or discomfort. This cry was softer, sadder, like a whimper pressed through fog. A sound calling from far away. In the dream, Lena always found herself walking down an unfamiliar hallway. She'd push open a door, and there, lit by a flickering bulb, was Atlas, curled tightly around a crib. But the crib was empty. She'd wake each time gasping, chest tight, with Atlas already at the side of her bed, watching her with those ancient, haunted eyes. Omar insisted it was just stress. "New mums dream weird things," he said, brushing her hair back. "And honestly, after what happened with the blanket, maybe your brain's just being protective." But Lena knew better. Atlas was dreaming too. Most nights he twitched in his sleep. Sometimes he whimpered. Twice he yelped, the sound sharp, full of panic. Lena sat with him on the floor those nights, stroking his fur until the trembling stopped. "You're still in that house, aren't you?" she murmured. Still with him. One evening, while Omar worked late, Lena sat in the nursery with Ayan asleep in her arms. The snow tapped against the windows, the room dim and calm. Atlas lay nearby, curled as always around the crib, one eye half open as if even in rest he couldn't fully let go. Then Lena spoke, not to Ayan but to Atlas. What was his name? The question wasn't planned. It left her lips like a breath she'd been holding for weeks. Atlas lifted his head. He stared at her. Not wagging, not moving, just staring, his entire body still. "Was it your boy?" Lena asked softly. "Did you think of him every time Ayan laughed?" The silence pressed in. Then came something Lena didn't expect. Atlas stood up and walked to the corner of the room. He looked at the wall, just a simple blue wall with stars painted above the crib, and pressed his nose to a spot near the baseboard. He whimpered. Once, then sat. Lena blinked. "What is it?" She walked over, crouched beside him, and touched the wall. Nothing unusual, just paint, dry and cold. But then she noticed something. Atlas's paw. He had scratched the wood trim slightly, not enough to damage it. Just a few curved marks, almost delicate, like he was tracing something, remembering. Lena sat there for a long time, hand on the floor beside him. That night, she looked up the child again, the one from the photo. She called the shelter, asked for records under the guise of checking for genetic medical issues, something a concerned owner might reasonably claim. The woman on the phone hesitated, but confirmed what Lena already suspected. The boy's name was Malik. He had died in his sleep. No foul play proven, but neglect had been suspected. A heater had malfunctioned. His parents claimed they hadn't heard him crying, but Atlas had. He had barked. He had tried. He had been too late. Now, as Lena watched him curl once again around Ayan's crib, always the same way, as if his body remembered what had gone wrong. Her chest ached for him. "You didn't fail him," she whispered across the room. Atlas didn't move, but his breathing, slow and deep, grew steadier, because deep down maybe he'd heard her. Maybe for the first time in years someone had said the words he'd waited to hear, yet something still lingered. A feeling, as if this wasn't the end of the story, but the moment just before the true danger returned, because some ghosts don't just haunt, some come back. By the time Ayan was 4 months old, the winter had begun to ease. Snow melted into cold slush along the sidewalks. Birds returned cautiously, testing the crisp morning air. The world outside was waking up. But inside Lena's home, the tension was growing. Atlas had become restless again, not the anxious pacing of his shelter days, but something different. He stood more often at the windows, sat by the front door for hours. His eyes tracked shadows as if waiting for one to step forward. Then one afternoon it did. Lena was in the kitchen, Ayaan napping in the living room bassinet, when Atlas growled. Not a bark, not a whimper, a deep, guttural growl that sent a shiver down her spine. She rushed to the window and followed his gaze, out toward the wooden fence at the edge of their yard. A man was standing there, not on their property, just beyond the fence. A tall figure in a dark jacket, hood up, hands in his pockets, unmoving. Lena squinted. "Hello?" The man didn't react. Atlas growled again, stepping between her and the glass. Lena reached for her phone and stepped away to call Omar. By the time she returned, the man was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just empty snow and the quiet drip of melting ice from the gutters. That night, Atlas didn't sleep. He sat by the nursery door, body tense, eyes fixed on the hallway, and Lena knew this wasn't paranoia, it was remembrance. The next day a letter arrived in their mailbox with no return address, a small stained envelope. Inside a single piece of paper, "He was just a dog. You should have let the past die." Lena's hands shook as she read it. No signature, no explanation. She looked over at Atlas lying beside Ayaan's playmat, eyes never leaving the baby. She sat beside him and whispered, "Who is he? Who's come back?" Atlas didn't answer. But that night, when Lena and Omar tried to settle into bed, Atlas refused to leave the nursery. He sat up the entire time, breathing shallow, ears perked, like he was waiting for someone to try the door. Something about the note clicked in Lena's mind. You should have let the past die. This wasn't just about Atlas's grief. This was about someone who didn't want the truth remembered. A week later, while Omar was at work and Ayaan played in the sunlit nursery, Lena made a decision. She called the officer listed in the original shelter report, the one who had investigated Malik's case. The woman, Detective Sadaf Riaz, answered cautiously. Her tone clipped until Lena explained who she was. "You're the woman who adopted the dog?" she asked. "Yes." Atlas. A pause. Then, "I thought about him a lot after it all went quiet. What made you call today?" "I think someone connected to the past is watching us," Lena said. "And I think they know Atlas remembers something they don't want remembered." Sadaf went quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I can't reopen the case unless new evidence surfaces, but I'll check on some records. That child Malik, he deserved better, that dog." Her voice wavered. "He wouldn't leave the crib even after the paramedics arrived. I've never seen an animal grieve like that." That night, the figure returned. Lena saw him through the baby monitor's window view. A dark shape near the tree line, unmoving again, but this time closer. Atlas was already standing when she rushed into the room. He stared at the window, body bristling, every muscle coiled. This wasn't grief anymore. It was warning. And this time, he wasn't waiting to protect Ayaan after something went wrong. He was preparing to stop it before it started. The past hadn't stayed buried, and the one who had taken Malik away, he had found them again. The house was silent, the kind of heavy silence that sinks into your skin. Snow had begun falling again, soft and slow, muffling the outside world. Ayaan slept peacefully in his crib, wrapped in warm blankets, one tiny hand curled like a blossom near his cheek. But Atlas was not at rest. He stood at the nursery door, unmoving, staring down the hallway. Lena sat beside him, clutching her phone. Detective Sadaf had confirmed it. The man who had once lived with Malik, the one who had blamed Atlas, then disappeared, had been released from a psychiatric facility 6 months earlier. No known address, no warning, and no one had told her they'd lost track of him. Now he was here, watching, waiting, a creak, not the kind houses make when they settle. A real one. A floorboard. Atlas growled, deep and low. Lena stood slowly and moved to the side of the nursery, heart pounding. She clutched the baby monitor in one hand and quietly opened the app that fed to the front door camera. It was offline. She swallowed hard and whispered to Atlas, "If anything happens, you protect him. No matter what." Atlas didn't turn to look at her. He simply braced his body, front legs strong, muscles flexed. He was already in the place between guardian and weapon. Another creak, then the door handle turned. Not Ayan's door, the front door, and suddenly, a crash. The door burst inward. Heavy boots thundered down the hallway. A shadow moved fast, too fast. And before Lena could scream, Atlas was gone, charging down the hall with a roar so primal it didn't sound like a dog at all. It sounded like grief, reborn as fury. Lena grabbed Ayan, clutching him to her chest as she crouched in the nursery corner, heart racing. The hallway echoed with shouts. A man's voice, angry, slurred, and Atlas's snarls, a violent growl that shook the walls, a thud, a scream, then silence. Lena waited, not moving, not breathing. And then, footsteps, slow ones. Atlas appeared first. Blood. On his coat, limping. Behind him, the man, the intruder, staggered into view, arms raised, face twisted in fear. Omar burst through the side door moments later, breathless, a shovel in one hand, and froze at the sight. Lena stood, voice shaking. He was in the house. Atlas walked forward and pressed against her leg, trembling but proud. He had done it. He had remembered. He had chosen differently this time, and this time he had been there in time. Police came. So did an ambulance, for the intruder, who'd suffered bite wounds and a dislocated shoulder. As the officers led him, away he screamed at Atlas, "It was just a dog, you hear me? Just a damn mutt." But the look on Atlas's face was calm, almost serene. He had waited years for this moment, not for vengeance, but for the chance to finally do what he was made. For protect later, Lena sat in the nursery with Ayan asleep in her arms, and Atlas beside them, stitches on his shoulder, his breathing slow but even. The snow outside had stopped. The house felt different now, like it had let go of something. No more pacing. No more staring into the night. Atlas slept peacefully for the first time since he'd come home, and Lena, through her tears, whispered, "You saved them both, Atlas. You saved Malik, and you saved Ayan." She leaned down and kissed the top of his head. "I know now. You didn't come to us by accident. You were sent to finish what you started." Atlas let out a long, slow breath, and for the first time since the night he lost Malik, he finally slept without curling into a guard, because the past had been faced, the cycle had been broken, and the giant dog, once called Broken, had done the impossible. He had healed.